Welcome to the first World Cup date, catching you up on the Women's World Cup this summer from France. My name's Jason Longshore. You know me if you listen to Soccer Down Here. If you listen to Unrelegated and the Queens of the South, you know Jessica Charman. What's up, Jess?
Just had a fantastic day watching 4 or 5 soccer games between Women's World Cup and the U20 World Cup, so feeling pretty good.
Yeah, can't go wrong with a rainy Saturday with that many games on. It's been good games too. It's been a lot of fun stuff to watch. If you didn't get a chance to see the games so far in the Women's World Cup, we'll catch you up on the scores real quick, and we'll give you a little bit of our thoughts on each of the matches. France kicked things off yesterday afternoon, 4-0 win over South Korea, as expected. Germany this morning, 1-0 over China, a little more difficult than might have been expected. Spain, 3-1 over South Africa, and then Norway, 3-0 over Nigeria in the final game of the second day. Let's just go in order and start with the opener yesterday, Jess. France, 4-0 over South Korea. Wendy Renard, 2 goals. South Korea, 0 shots on target. Pretty much as most people thought coming into it, though, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I think for most of us, France was our obvious favorite, the home nation, but they just showed that there was no pressure and it looked like they were enjoying it. I think there were some expectations on the players and they'll have been glad to come out with such a strong start. I felt kind of bad watching for Korea because it was such a one-way dominant game. And honestly, where France really dominated was in their size. They've got several really large players. I know the lady that scored the 2 headers, she's like 6'1" or something. And when you play against a team that has no sizable figures in their squad, it's always going to be easy at set plays. And I think any team that's going to face France needs to be aware of their set play dominance.
Yeah, you just can't give up set pieces to Renard, the Leon center back. At her height, I thought Christy Rampone on Fox last night did a pretty good job of discussing what teams are going to have to do, because there's just not a whole lot of center backs who can deal with that. But you've got to get a body in, you've got to get an elbow in, you've got to throw off her run, and the goals, her height's going to give her the advantage, but they were pretty much clean looks on goal on these set pieces.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if it was to do with zonal marking potentially or whether they were just not following our runs, but it looked so easy for Renard in the air. I think it was actually their skipper at the back that lost the run several times, and you just can't do that, particularly when it's a second time. It happened, the 2 goals, they weren't identical in terms of one was a lot further out, but they were identical in the fact that it was a lone header. There was no challenge. It almost looked like the defender that was on Renard backed out, and that's just inexcusable at this level.
Yeah, at this level and with goal differential becoming such a big thing with third-place teams going through, I wonder if South Korea is going to feel like they might have really affected their World Cup run with this first match and those extra goals they gave up. Germany and China was the early game this morning, and it was a tale of 2 halves, I think. You know, it took Julia Gwynn a second-half goal off a poor clearance off a set piece, a blast from outside the top of the 18. I think the big storyline for me watching it was 19 fouls from China. Very physical, but it felt kind of cynical to me. A lot of late tackles, a lot of studs-up challenges, lots of hits on the ankle after the ball's gone, and it felt like the referee was reluctant to go to the book.
I think it was uncharacteristic of a China team from the China I've watched growing up. Oftentimes it's been stereotyped that the Asian nations are small, they're weak, they fail in the physicality of the game. And I think potentially they went out with a game plan, and that was to rattle their German opposition and to play in a way that they haven't been seen before. There were a lot of fouls. It was potentially cynical, like you say, but it was a game plan, and I think it worked. I'm not saying that's a game plan I would encourage in a team that I was coaching, but you know what? It was effective. It rattled the Germans. They looked bothered. When the cameras zoomed in on a lot of players after being fouled for Germany, you could tell they were pissed off. They were bothered, and it worked. It broke down the Germans' possession. And sometimes, like I say, you're playing in these competitions to win. You're hoping to hold it out. You're hoping to stop the flow of the Germans. But as I actually predicted on Twitter, it was the size difference in the Germans and the Germans sort of build an aerial presence from the box that I think allowed them to score from a set play. the Chinese weren't able to get a good enough clearance on the box. And it was a fantastic strike that probably wasn't closed down as well as it should have been. But what a great strike it was for the goal.
Yeah, outstanding strike from Gavin, 19-year-old defender from Freiburg. That was the 17th time that Germany has not lost in a group stage match. I think their last loss in a group stage match was back in the first tournament, 1991. They just find a way to get it done, and this was a weird one where they dominated possession. They had, the majority of the play, but China in the first half had a couple of great counters, a couple of great chances, one off the post, one forced to save. They really weren't able to build from there, and the second half was all Germany.
Yeah, I think if you look back as the Chinese team, you're encouraged by the amount of chance you had, but you're disappointed about your finishing. There were a couple of chances where I feel like the forwards just took too many touches and they invited the German goalkeeper to push on or the defense to step to the ball, and they wasted several quality chances. And had they finished them, I think it would have been a different game if Germany had gone a goal down.
Spain and South Africa was an odd one. South Africa gets the opener with a spectacular goal of the tournament so far. But Spain comes back and wins 3-1. Jennifer Hermoso with 2 penalty kick goals, the first time that's ever happened in Women's World Cup history. And Spain, as expected, dominated possession 73%. And it felt like they just kind of wore South Africa down throughout the match.
Yeah, I think the difference was the professional level of soccer that these girls are playing back home, honestly. You've got a team that has nearly all full professionals in Spain that play together week in, week out against a South African team that's sort of chip-chopped, probably not playing at the same level of domestic soccer. And I think that showed on the field. For the first sort of 45 minutes, I think momentum and sort of thrill of being in the World Cup pushed South Africa through. While they didn't have that much possession, I thought when they had the ball, they looked dangerous. They had speed. They had confidence. They were trying different things on the ball, and it was really exciting to watch. But I think once that second half got into roll, Spain found their rhythm a little bit more. The possession was tiring out the South Africans. They went down to 10 players, and once they were down 10 players and 2-1 down, it could have been 4-5-1 in the end.
Yeah, you're dead on the level of talent in the roster. South Africa has 6 players who play outside the country, 1 who plays in La Liga with Malaga, and Hermoso, the goal scorer, 2 goals on the day. She plays for Atletico Madrid. 28 goals now for Spain for Hermoso. Spain, I think it was a surprise for them to go down, but they kind of leaned into who they are. Very technical. It's honestly similar to the men's squad in that they want to dominate possession. They want the ball at their feet, and they expect their ability on the ball to ultimately control the match for them.
Yeah, and it was a good game for them. They'll be happy with the fact they went 1 down and they were able to get the sort of 3 goals in the end, but I think they'll still be disappointed that they went 1 down. They were a little bit lackadaisical in possession at time, taking some risks, and they invited South Africa on to press them. It probably wasn't the game they're expecting. They were probably expecting an easy game. I know I heard in the commentary on BBC that South Africa's game plan was basically not to concede for 20 minutes. And they were able to do that. They defended hard, but towards the end, the tiredness kicked in, and it was easy for the Spaniards. By the 80th minute, they were walking through, and like I say, South Africa will take a sigh of relief. They'll be disappointed because of the position they started in, but it could have been a lot worse towards the end.
Yeah, they're still in it for sure. Only giving up 2, and after that red card, it could have gotten really out of hand for South Africa. Nigeria started out pretty well in the finale today, but ended up losing 3-0 to Norway. It felt like the game was so open early on, but once Norway got the opening goal, Nigeria kind of struggled to respond to that.
Yeah, I think it was self-destruct mode for the Nigerian defense, honestly. When you look to the 3 goals, they're all 3 goals that could have been avoided through better defensive clearances. At times, they were looking to play the long ball over, and they just didn't seem to be getting enough power behind the ball, and it was going straight to the Norwegians. And the Norwegians were fantastic at counterattacking, putting the ball through. And I just think Nigeria need to sort of regroup before the next game and realize that they have so much going forwards, but they have to focus on their defense first, because you can't outscore the number of goals you concede. I really like the look of Ortega for Nigeria. I think she can be a fantastic
Hmm.
forward-going presence, but they need to find her the ball more. She's not the largest player. You're not going to find her in the air, and I think that's where Nigeria are making several errors, looking for those long ball clearances straight down the throat. One goal came from a goal kick. You just got to learn to play the way and the style that suits your players. You're not always going to be able to play long ball. You're not always going to be able to play out the back, and you have to learn which players you're passing the ball to in which way suits them for receiving.
It's a great point. Nigeria, 67% passing on the day, I think shows that. They just kind of gave the ball away needlessly at times, and Norway punished them. The opener, I thought, was an outstanding goal, short corner, and it was Gerdo Reiten, who was one of the players of the match for sure. She's headed to Chelsea next season and celebrates it with a great goal to open things up. And I'm with you. Nigeria felt like they self-destructed after that, and we'll see if they can bounce back. I've got to ask you about VAR, because VAR has been a story for the day, and it became probably the biggest story with that second penalty in the Spain-South Africa match. What have you thought about video assistant referees at the Women's World Cup so far?
I thought it was going okay. The handball, since they've changed the rules on the handball, so the first penalty in that game, it seemed harsh. If you were basing it on the old rule, she was very close to the ball. It would have been hard, but at the end of the day, it did strike Van Heyk's arm, and I understand why it was given. But the second, for me, is unfair. I don't believe it is a clear and obvious error not to give the penalty, and therefore I don't think it's fair that it's given. I understand it studs up when you look at it in slow motion, as is always the way. Something looks worse. It is a high challenge. The studs may be up, but I don't think it's an intentional, deliberate foul. Instead, what I think happens is the player strikes the ball clear and her momentum sort of rocks her backwards, and that's why her leg goes so high up the air. And there's a difference between a tackle and a clearance. I think it's cruel to pull something back in slow motion and view it as a foul when it's just a clearance of the ball. And for me, if you look at that sort of challenge, if you look at momentum taking someone forward on a clearance, you're giving foul after foul away in a game. Those happen all the time, those sort of momentum moving challenges when you're clearing a ball. Of course, your follow through is sometimes going to strike someone, but is that a foul? Not in my eyes. And most importantly, as the definition of VAR is, it's got to be a clear and obvious error. And I just don't think that that was the case. And I also believe that, as you say, something is so different when you slow it down that you have to make these decisions in real time.
Yeah, it felt like an overreach for me. I think a lot of people are still getting used to VAR and when it can jump in and when it doesn't. This was the epitome of the clear and obvious situation. It wasn't a goal. It wasn't, an offside situation that's going to be reviewed. It's something that had to be, the video assistant referee had to buzz in and say, hey, you missed this, and have to convince the referee that it was missed. If it had been called on the field, I think it would have been harder to argue with, because you look at it and I can see why the call was ultimately made, but I'm with you. I feel like it, in the context of the match and in the context of that play, it didn't need to be called. And that's the most important thing.
I think if you look back, no one on the other team was complaining, and I think that shows that it's not a clear and obvious error. And for me, the hardest thing is they've already given a penalty. I know you can't make decisions based on heart and sympathy. If you're rooting for the underdog, like most people are, obviously I've probably got a biased opinion. But for me, it was just harsh. And what made it even harder was, of course, the player that committed the foul was on that first yellow. And as soon as you give a foul away like that, if the referee sees it as studs up that high, I mean, if anything, it could have been a straight red for that foul if she was basing it as a malicious tackle, because, I mean, I think the contact was almost in the player's midriff.
Right. It's an awkward situation, and I felt like it didn't need to be called here. I understand it. I don't feel like the VAR needed to intervene here, and we'll have to keep an eye on it, because this is the first time in the women's game we've had video assistant referees. We have it in Major League Soccer. We've had it at the World Cup from the men's side, and you've seen some of the bumpy things that have happened along the way with that. You do have some referees that are maybe a little new to the video assistant referee side of things, and maybe A little overzealous. That's what this one felt like to me. Let's get into tomorrow's games. 3 on the docket. Starts earlier than today. Your kickoff times are a little different. 7 a.m. Eastern Time, Australia and Italy. 9:30 a.m. Brazil and Jamaica. And we did get word today that Marta will miss that game for Brazil. She's out with a left thigh injury. And then at noon, a game that I'm just going to assume that Jess is a little excited about. England and Scotland.
I don't know if it's excitement, Jason, or nerves, honestly. That's what I was thinking the whole time watching all these games. I'm picking my favorite team, and I'm sort of nervous watching the game for them. I can't even imagine when it's my nation playing. And to start off with Scotland, I think it's a dream order for both teams because they want to get that one out of the way. It's going to be a tough one. Scotland really have nothing to lose. Obviously, they're the underdog in that one. And I feel like all the pressure is on the shoulders of the Lionesses. It's the most hope that an English team has had in a World Cup for a very long time. And for me, back hopping off a very successful men's World Cup, there is everyone behind the nation. And it's the first time that that's happened for my lifetime, at least, that people, males, females, everyone in the nation is following because they believe that this is a year that England can really go far. And this is a year, as a lot of the players have even said, they want to go out and win the World Cup. And they've got to start strong. They've had a little bit of a rocky last couple of games. And this is where they need to put their best foot forward against what you would call a rival, honestly.
100%. And these 3 games tomorrow, as good as today was, tomorrow feels like the World Cup gets kicked into a whole nother gear. Australia and Sam Kerr, one of the best players in the world, one of the best goal scorers in the world. I have Australia making the final. If they can fix things defensively, they have the firepower to get to the final. Italy, it's their first time since 1999, but they were very strong in European qualifying. They're going to be better than they have ever been with the rise of the game in Serie A at the women's level. I'm excited to see that one. Jamaica, their World Cup debut, Bunny Shaw, getting all the headlines right now, and with Brazil weakened with the Marta injury, that one could, I think it's the one most people are picking an upset in. And then England, Scotland, I'm with you. Scotland has nothing to lose here, and England will be feeling pressure, maybe for the first time in this type of situation where they are the overwhelming favorite against a rival. And it's a little harder to be the favorite against a team that knows you so well. So I'm thrilled about these 3 games. I think we're going to learn a lot about 3 teams in England and Brazil and Australia who different people have as contenders for the title.
And what I'll say about this set of games is for anyone that is new to watching the female game that thinks, I would feel like today there was sort of some uneven matches. You also have yesterday's game against France. It was pretty uneven. When it comes to close-cut, nail-biting games, I think tomorrow is going to be that day.
Yeah, 100%. Can't wait for it. 7 o'clock, Australia, Italy. 9:30, Brazil, Jamaica. 12 o'clock, England, Scotland. FS1 for the first 2 in the U.S., and England, Scotland will be on regular Fox. Looking forward to 3 good games. We're going to come back tomorrow. We'll be joined by our friend Kelly Francis as well to talk about these 3 and kind of where the World Cup is after day 3. Thanks, everybody, for listening to our first World Cup date. We'll be back tomorrow.